All right, welcome to River Styx Nonfiction Q&A series, RSNF. I'm Matt Torralba Andrews, assistant editor at River Styx, and I'm joined by River Styx nonfiction editor Claire Walla. Today, we're speaking with our guest, Rajiv Mohabir, about his piece from Whale Lore, which readers and listeners can read online now in River Styx. Poet, memoirist, and translator, Rajiv Mohabir is the author of 4 books of poetry, including Whale Aria and Cutlish. His poetry and nonfiction have been finalists for the PEN America Open Book Award, the Lambda Literary Award, and the Guyana Prize for Literature, among many others. His translations also have been honored by the American Academy of Poets. He is an assistant professor of poetry at the University of Colorado Boulder. Thank you for joining us, Rajiv.
Thank you. What an absolute pleasure it is to be with you all. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to come.
To start us off, could you set the scene for the kind of experience or experiences that inspired from Whale Lore?
Thank you. Yeah, Whale Lore has been a large project that I've been assembling over the years. And basically, this project was born out of my desire to connect with my poetic impulse and the natural history of sea mammals, and particularly whales, that I was encountering when I was living in Hawaii. I didn't realize just how incredibly expansive this would be, meaning that my research would spawn what will become 3 books, hopefully, and Whale Lore being the kind of book that represents a journal that I kept of whale watching, that includes poetry as I moved up the American, or North American, excuse me, Pacific Rim.
The first section of From Whale Lore begins with description and reflection and ends with the line, "I see deep into myself then with each humpback eye that finds me mid-breach." As readers, this line felt so visceral and in the moment, and I wonder if this was true to your experience. Was this particular piece inspired by a particular moment?
When what you experienced from Whale Lore, that's published in the River Styx, that happens in Monterey Bay. Like, and when I say happens, it was like literally I was going whale watching every day for about a week. I'd gotten this like really great funding to go and to like do this exploration, and it was really lovely. And I'd been haunted by whales for ages. They came to me in dreams, and the first time I like encountered a humpback whale was transformative, in that like I was on a whale watching vessel, and I remember going into the water and like feeling the whale song, not just through my ears, but reverberate through my entire body. And I thought that was like incredible and magical. The closest I've been to a whale was when a whale decided to approach a vessel, and not in any of these journeys that I had taken on the West Coast, but actually in Massachusetts, in Stellwagen Preserve, off of the right, like maybe 20-30 minutes outside of Boston, and like seeing the eye see you, or seeing the eye see me, was incredible, in that like I was gazing into a consciousness, or an animal making sense of my animal body, knowing that I was probably engaged in the same act of reading it and trying to interpret this. And so it just was kind of like this like beautiful moment for me to be like, oh, this is like the eye of the whale, and I'm like staring right into it. Absolutely. So this is kind of maybe one of the things I'm trying to migrate into poetic form, I guess, is what does it mean to like behold and to be beheld, right? This is kind of like one of the like existential, obsessions of Whale Lore, which started in that Monterey Bay time within this journey, across the North American continental landmass on the coast.
One of the many things that struck us from reading your piece was the terminology used in the piece, like terms like umwelten and spermaceti, and that the average reader may not know. And our sense of the text really deepened when we actually researched those terms, like figured out kind of that work off the page. Is that intentional in your work to kind of expand the text beyond the page? And could you talk a bit about the experience you hope readers have in reading this piece?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to use kind of like these technical words to show also that, I had read deeply, of course, but then also to show that there's like a whole reservoir of diction that, people have been using to be very precise about cetacean life. And I think that like my hope is that people come away from reading this particular essay And in fact, all of the essays here in whale lore, with an idea and with an understanding that there are so many differences between the species of whales, because a lot of contemporary writers, and this is like no tea, this is no shade, this is just my obsessive mind that was like rewarded with field guidebooks when I got straight A's as a third grader. You know what I mean? It's this mind at work and not anything else. But just to remind people that like uh, uh, there are completely the toothed whales and the baleen whales are very, very different in their evolutionary histories and also like their feeding patterns, their styles of communication or whatever. We say whale and we lump everything together. So like naming the thing is so damn important, I think, which then, extends into the idea of the umwelt. I like to use the word umwelt because I have a degree in religious studies, and we use the word Weltanschauung to refer to like worldview. And this is like my own little like weird game with language where I'm like thinking that a worldview and phenomenological reality based in like the senses, like those kind of like to me form some kind of parallel. So in my mind, that's how that word is used.
Matt and I were also struck with how many forms make it into this piece, from the research to scientific language to poetry to bold type. And we're wondering if, as you said before, there's just the limits of human consciousness and understanding whales and other creatures. Was writing this sort of as a hybrid text, I don't know if you would call it that, but in this hybrid form, intentional in as far as the limits of human language, or was it something that just kind of organically came through?
So this is a question I wish I had a really like clever writerly answer for, because like quite honestly, these were in my whale watching journals. Like I literally was just keeping journals of when I would go whale watching to be like the kind of like raw material that I would use for my poetry. And then when I got back, when I got back from Alaska, I had like a Juneau, I had like opened it up and I was like, you know what, actually, this could make a really interesting book. Those Victorian era commonplace books that people would just like write down fragments of everything that they saw? This is kind of like akin to that. I call it my whale watching journal, really, kind of when I'm being like real, like this is literally what it is. But when I'm feeling a little bit more poetic, I'm like, it's my answer, this form that I'm writing in, or these forms that I'm writing in, is my answer to the ship captain's whaling log. So all of the whaling vessels in the 1800s, early 1900s, would have these like logbooks that the captains would use to document like what they saw, how many whales they harvested, and what the winds were doing and what the seas were doing. I thought like this would be really cool to be like, well, what are my internal winds doing? What are my internal seas doing? So maybe this is like that kind of tongue-in-cheek play that I'm hoping to achieve.
And we asked this of all our guests. So do you have a nonfiction reading recommendation for our listeners and readers?
Nina Sharma's The Way You Make Me Feel, Love in Black and Brown is a great memoir and love letter between Black and Brown communities in the United States. This Land is Holy by Noam Kaim is a great book from Radix Media that has just come out. And it's a collection of essays that are linked about settling on land, and particularly settling as an Israeli on Palestinian land. Um, there's Grace Lowe Prasad's memoir, The Translator's Daughter. It's really beautiful meditation on migration and language as such. And then, of course, the how-to kind of book um, uh, called Crafting the Lyric Essay, Striking a Chord by Heidi Cherwick. And then Sayanthini Dasgupta from North Carolina, because there's several Sayanthini Dasguptas. The one from North Carolina, she has a book of essays coming out called Brown Women Have Everything to Say, Essays on Discomfort and Delight. And it's like in production right now. I just got a PDF of it, and I'm like, this is like the book that I feel like I've needed for a while that I'm going to be gifting to like maybe 5 women in my life. So thank you for asking.